All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. I'm here with someone who has not been on the show before and is in a relatively new band to me, but I think it probably has more history than I'm assuming. So we'll get into that in just a second. But if you want to introduce yourself and give a bit of background about what you do as a musician, I think that's a good way to start it off.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Claire Thérèse from Claire Thérèse and the Lockdown, and yeah, it's true. We've been a band in many incarnations for a long time, which is just kind of my style. I move at a fairly slow pace with with many things I do, but yeah, the band itself has kind of it 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 started with like one grouping of people and has just kind of like morphed into many other groupings and now contains eight active musicians. Not we don't always play together, but it just kind of struck me at some point that I had this kind of very like fluid band that suited me very, very well. So some of the members are the same, some are completely changed. And yeah, we've been I think Jaime and I have been playing together for almost a decade now.
Okay.
He's probably like the longest member. And then this kind of core group has been together for about 4 years.
Okay, and I guess the reason that maybe it seems newer is because it seems like because you have a record that just came out, there's been this sort of flurry of activity recently, and part of that too is the pandemic, kind of preventing anyone from playing shows. So it seems like you've been super active as a band over the past few months, and so I guess I mean that makes a lot of sense when you have a record that's come out. So this just came out, I guess, a couple of weeks ago now from when we're recording. What can you tell me about the album?
Yeah, so the album is about a decade's worth of songs. And we recorded it during the pandemic. So that was, its own challenge for sure. Our band was the lockdown before the lockdown, and it was like this very strange moment where I went to like I hand screen printed my covers and it was just like, okay, this is the last moment to change the band name. But actually kind of felt very it was appropriate before, and it kind of felt like this very unique time.
Yeah.
So yeah, we recorded this album at Argyle Studio with Cam Lepke. And then again, I just like sometimes the way I move with things is just kind of at this pace where it's like, okay, well, the album's done. And now I had this like vision. I really wanted to hand screen print things. I wanted to do it on vinyl. So everything just kind of like was taking its sweet time. And kind of 2 years later, we were offered this gig at the Goodwill, and I love costumes. I love anything like that. It was October 29th, and I was like, okay, let's just make this our album release, because otherwise I could sit on it for another 2 years.
Right.
So yeah, we have been like we were gigging before the pandemic, but definitely not a lot. Just because I have lots of projects on the go. But it really solidified itself in like making the record that this was something I really wanted to put my time and attention to.
Yeah.
And so it has been really exciting to be offered like other gigs since the album release. I think it was like a shock I have friends who didn't know I was a musician. Okay, I can be kind of shy about it.
Yeah.
So when I was like kind of trying to, you know, hustle the show and be like, if you're going to come to one of my things, please come to this. People, yeah, it was really funny that some people's responses were like, oh my God, you're in a band.
Well, and it's not just you're in a band playing your first show either. This is like a band that has already had this established body of work, and you have a record coming out and costumes for that show and everything. So yeah, that's cool. That's a cool introduction, I think, to people to meet you at that point in the band's trajectory.
Yeah, like we've practiced lots.
Well,
I like to think we're pretty tight at this point. So yeah, it kind of felt like this like kind of like coming into the world, and I just felt so like I think sometimes as artists it's like really hard to like feel kind of proud of ourselves, or to, I don't know, just to like feel confident about what we're doing. And
Sure.
so this kind of like decade long lead up to this, it actually was an event that I was like, I want people there. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a great time. I think people will like it. And so it was kind of fun to have a packed room full of people, many of whom had never seen us before.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. What was the you mentioned that you recorded this during the pandemic. What was that like? Because I know we had so many kind of ebbs and flows, and there'd be times where you were allowed to see people for a few weeks, and then that would change. Like, how did that affect the whole process of making an album when it's so up in the air of what you could and couldn't do?
Yeah, I mean, there's something so lovely, and I had wanted to go in and just record the band off the floor,
Okay,
and it turns out we're not that good. Turns out you got to be pretty good to do it right off the floor. So um, it was just a suggestion that Cam had gently made, that like we might just want to do it in layers, and so that was actually like kind of positive, because it meant that we could meet in smaller groups to do the recording. And yeah, I think something that I like, I work in community. I was working at a community health clinic
okay,
during the pandemic. So I like to think that I come at this from a place. One of the reasons we have like kind of a lot of members is to accommodate that other people have lives and their own projects, and I never want it to feel like something that people have to say yes to, or that it relies on kind of total buy-in. So
yeah,
it was a lot of like negotiating how people's comfort levels and the restrictions, and so it took longer than we thought, but also I don't know, there was something like really, really special about kind of being able to come in and hear something that like Vince had laid down. And I didn't get to be in the room for it, but I got to hear it after.
cool,
And so there was lots of beautiful surprises for me. And yeah, just we took, I like to believe we took really good care of each other during that period. And I think that that really like shows on the album. Um, yeah, we cooked food for each other. We
nice.
had tea there. Like it was a very like kind of felt very like nourishing, the whole experience. Which is how I like my artistic projects to feel, and strive for them to feel that way.
Do you feel that that's reflected on the record? Like, can you hear that kind of? I mean, obviously, you're not hearing people drinking tea and cooking for each other, like literally on the record. But is that kind of warmth and togetherness and stuff? Does that nourishing vibe? Do you hear that when you listen back to the recordings?
I do for sure, because I think there was like, yeah, we couldn't be playing together all the time. Like it was, we weren't able to, yeah, so much of it we weren't able to all be in the same room at the same time. And so I think yeah, you can hear someone who went away and like practiced a bit that was like really, where it was like, oh my God, I love that, let's put that on there. And then to get to hear it back and know that they like went home and worked on it on their own.
Yeah,
I hear that reflected on the album, that we all like kept working on it even when we couldn't be together.
that's cool. Yeah, that's got to be satisfying to hear that too in the finished product, and sort of recognize that how it came from the starting point to this finished thing that's now out in the world. But I was going to ask you. You mentioned earlier on and a few times the kind of the fluidity of the band, in that people have other projects. I know you have members in that band who are in like multiple other projects themselves, and so how are these songs written? Like what happens? How does a song get from the beginning to the finished product on the record when you don't necessarily know who's going to be available for a certain practice or show or whatever? I mean, is there sort of I was going to say mold, like a cookie cutter way of doing it, where you write a certain part and then it gets added to, or how does how does a song get created with this project?
So I write the music, and and I bring it usually first to my sister, who actually doesn't perform. She performed for the album release, but she doesn't perform with us anymore.
Okay,
But we've you know, we've been singing together since children, and her way of arranging harmonies is just very, very unique and very beautiful to me. I'm really, really into her, the way she hears things. So I bring it to her, and then we bring it to the band. And yeah, I think that it keeps things very, very exciting because there are people who play different instruments. So for the longest time, we didn't have a bass player. Like
Right.
there was like 4 people who played bass. It was just a bit of either an oversight or just like no one in the band, that wasn't their main instrument. Um, we have multiple people who do harmonies. They do their own harmonies. They do different harmonies. So for me, there's an excitement as kind of like the front person of the band, that often the songs don't sound exactly the same
Yeah.
in each show. Um, yeah, I have a hard time doing something like over and over and over and over again. And I do understand that these like songs as an album like will now be played for a while. We'll do these at shows. And so there is something kind of like fun for me about the excitement of like, oh right, this person's playing bass today and this person's playing guitar, and we have no vocalette, like, or no harmonies, or we have
Right.
all the harmonies. So it's really cool because people have learned each other's parts. And I think that we're kind of at the point where like we could play, I can play some of these songs solo, we can play with a trio. Um, yeah, and so it keeps it very like alive for me. And
Well, that
it also kind of opens it up to other people being like, hey, I would like to play something in the band.
right, and they can add to those and change them, and they can morph. But then that kind of brings up another question too, though, and you sort of touched on this, but these are songs that have been in the works for a long time. They're finally out in the world on the record. People, like you said, are going to want to hear them. They're going to want to hear the songs they've familiarized themselves with. Will they at any point, or do you think that at any point they'll seem like it's old stuff and you've moved on from it, or does that variety every night sort of make them fresher? Because I mean, I've talked to bands who, a week after they release an album, they're already done and they're sick of those songs forever and want to move on to the next thing. Like, have you experienced that, or are you still quite comfortable sort of presenting variations on these songs?
No, I'm exactly in that place. I'm like, oh my God, I've been playing these songs for so long. Like, yeah, like I work a lot in theater, and for me, what I love about theater is like the process leading up to opening night. I
Right.
love rehearsing, I love playing, I love like discovering things, and then opening night happens, and I'm like, oh, now I have to do the same play every night. And of course, there will be like nuances, and there will be nights that are like more alive than others.
Yeah.
But there is this kind of like grief that I feel on opening night where I'm just like, oh, we're done playing. So, like, one thing I'm definitely struggling with, and I don't think I'm alone. I think there were lots of artists who like just put out tons, like who did a lot of creation during the pandemic.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, like Daniel Romano releasing like 10 albums a year or something, like, someone like just, and I had total writer's block. I couldn't write. I wasn't drawn to writing. In fact, I couldn't even like listen to music for the first year of the
Oh,
pandemic,
well.
which was so sad for me. It was it actually was an indicator that I was like maybe feeling a little bit better when I put on an album and listened to an album. So yeah, for me, the album, it does feel like there's like a little bit of a bookmark on the project. I do refer to the band as a project instead of a band, because I do like the idea of things being project based.
Okay.
And this one does in many ways feel done, but I know that kind of in the, you know, in music now, we've released something, people can hear it, and now potentially we'll play shows. But yeah, I think there's gonna have to be a period for me where I just go back in. I successfully finished a song finally the other day. It just
Cool.
felt like such a milestone. Um, but yeah, and I don't know if it'll be Claire Therese in the Lockdown. It might be something completely different. Um, so yeah, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I definitely am having that feeling of like, okay, we did the thing. We did the thing, and now let's do something else.
Yeah, no time for something new. Yeah, yeah. What is the reception been to the record so far? And I have some more questions about the record specifically, but I'm just curious because I mean, like the show obviously is a different thing. I unfortunately couldn't make it to the show, but I saw the photos and everything. It looked really fun. But and like you said earlier too about people seeing you for the first time playing music in that context. But as far as the recordings themselves, what kind of response have you gotten from people, whether they knew you were a musician or not?
Yeah, it's been really lovely. Like I've had a lot of people tell me that it's been a bit of a cathartic album for them, that there's lots of uh, like tears that have been kind of released. And I don't think necessarily it's like a sad kind of sad music
Yeah,
album.
no, no,
But I think there is like a narrative. Uh, the album tells a story. Um, and yeah, it's been really cool, like having people. I've always struggled with kind of genre. Like I go to apply for something and the genre thing comes up and I'm like, and then I just stop applying because I'm like, I don't know. So that's been really neat because I've had people come up and be like, that's like outlaw country. Like I feel like badass when I listen to your album. And then I've had people be like, this is like sad. Yeah, this makes me feel like I can cry to this album.
right.
So it feels like quite a spectrum of response. So yeah, and I mean I've just kind of released it only on Bandcamp. So in if you have to be a Bandcamp or a vinyl listener to have heard the album.
Yeah.
So yeah, someone the other day told me that I was on rotation with Christine Fellows, and that was just like made my heart so happy. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Have you heard the new
Um,
Christine Fellows record?
I'm I
It's
haven't,
it's
but
really
someone is
good.
dropping it off tomorrow to me, and I'm very, very
It's
excited.
really, really good. Yeah, yeah. So, but that's a great person to be compared to. I mean, to have that comparison for sure. That
Well, and I don't know if it's a comparison, but people are
okay,
listening to us at the same time.
right? You're on the same playlist or whatever they're calling it. Yeah, yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool. Um, well, and that, I hate asking people about genre too because it's such a difficult question because especially now it seems like everything has 16 subgenres and offshoot genres and it's like impossible to pin anything down. The outlaw country thing is interesting. I think from listening to the album just today even, I mean there's some stuff that for sure I could see having the country sound. There's stuff that's obviously more folk influenced. There's but then having the full band involved there, it brings in other stuff as well. And I think it was on Bandcamp, one of the tags was folk grunge, which
Yeah.
I thought was interesting. Is that what you consider it? Like if you have to think about what you would call it, just like if you had to come up with a short version of how to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of loved, and someone kind of gave us uh that tag. I mean, I obviously I write folk music. That's kind of what comes out of me.
Yeah,
I um wish that sometimes other things came out of me, but that's what comes out of me. But I don't think I have issues with sometimes the folk genre, and I think that there are limitations to the folk genre, and I think that there are stories within the folk genre that I just don't kind of relate to. And so, yeah, someone recently said to me that they really appreciated that I write love songs that are not love songs.
right.
And so I think that's maybe where the kind of grunge comes in. I'm really like, I love the kind of folk punk genre. There's lots of bands that I love that kind of put out that really like
Yeah, the crusty kind of folk.
the
Yeah,
crusty folk.
yeah.
And I also know that we're not that genre. So kind of folk grunge, uh I mean I loved grunge, so I'm
Yeah,
not
me too. Yeah.
surprised that maybe comes through in the album. So it is, they are folk. When I do them by myself, it's folk. And then I have this like just incredible band that just brings all of these other elements to it. Yeah.
Do you think the songs, I mean, if you're just playing them by yourself and it's in that more folk kind of mode, do you think that different elements of the song are brought out when you have the full band playing? I mean, obviously the lyrics are the same and the basic structure of the song is going to be similar, but are there different feelings that come from it when you hear it, in just a stripped down version versus something that's a lot more fleshed out?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, like the musicians, the band all does their own arranging, so they blow me away. Like
Yeah.
there's part of that where it's just like, whoa, I would never have heard that for. I mean, when we got Max Harrison on trombone, it was just when it was suggested, I was like, trombone, like what?
It's a
That
cool
makes no
addition though.
sense. And it's like I miss Max when he doesn't, when he's not available to play a show, because there are some swells that he brings out that, like, that's all I can hear and that's all I want to hear. I recently got to play like a singer songwriter evening, and it was the first time, like I don't know, like maybe in a decade, that I've played solo.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I used to play solo, and it was just too much for me. I wasn't enjoying it, wasn't fun for me. But I got to do this singer-songwriter night, and it was really cool to kind of like curate the songs that I wanted to do for that night. Some of which were on the album, some of which weren't. But there's I think sometimes it's like so vulnerable when you're singing by yourself these
Sure.
songs that have come out of you. And so with the whole band, sometimes I feel like there is this ability for me to take on a different persona. And so they are still my songs and they are still meaningful to me and they still come out of me. But there's a way for me to kind of step out of them a little bit and take on a bit of a persona, which I actually quite love. So the band, yeah, like I Vince, I love Vince's guitar. He brings that really lovely country twang that,
Yeah.
I don't know how to play. That's not in my skill set. And then someone like Ava just like shredding. And I mean, it's all things that once I hear it, I'm like, oh, yay. I'm so happy this is here. This is exactly what I want here. I just didn't have the language for it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And some people are really good at that. Like some people are really good at like, okay, the drums need to do this and I want to hear this out of. I just don't have the musical language. And so it's really cool to work with people who bring things and you're just like, yes, that's it. That's the thing I wanted.
Yeah, that's super cool. And you have some, I don't know everyone in your band, but the ones I do know, they're incredible musicians. Like you've managed to put together a pretty solid group of talents that can bring, like you said, all those different aspects to the table. It's very cool.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I feel super grateful because they've all. I think we've all just come together. There was this moment where we lost an old guitar player, and we were thinking about, okay, who do we replace them with, and it was like our we actually weren't looking for the best guitarist. We were looking for the person who would dig hanging out with us, and I love that that's kind of our criteria. And
Yeah,
then we got Vince Andrushko, who is an incredible musician and is just weird enough to fit in totally fine with us.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I know you mentioned earlier Bandcamp and vinyl are the places to get the record. Is that going to change at any point? Or are you keeping those sort of the two ways people can hear this?
I don't know, but probably. I feel, yeah, I mean, I feel this. I wanted to do it on vinyl because I think that people listen to vinyl.
Yeah, for sure.
And not, I don't just mean like people, I mean like they really listen to the album. And I thought, if this was a decade in the making, if this is the only time I release something like this, I want
Yeah,
it to be something that people are tender with. And in the same way, I think Bandcamp is like that. You actually have to, it it's not the most popular streaming platform, but I think it's the one that's kind of kindest to
Oh,
artists.
totally. Yeah, yeah. Well, as a
Um,
listener, it's the only one I use too. Like I love it. It's, but
oh,
it is awkward like compared to some of these other ones that do all the work for you. Like Bandcamp,
yes.
you have to seek out what you want and actually take the time. But can people buy the record on the Bandcamp page, or do they have to contact you to get the copy of the record?
No, no, now oh, if you want the actual vinyl, I'm still, yeah, I mean, I am super challenged with technology, so that's partially why things move really slow on my end. I told people like I'm super willing to like drop vinyl off at your house. I still work at a bar once a week, and so people have been coming to the bar to pick it up. At some point, yeah, I think I'd like to mail things off Bandcamp, and at some point, um, sure, it can just it could go up somewhere else. But there is something about, I don't know. I printed 200 copies of this album and thought, um, if 200 of my friends and family and people in my community have this album, then it's for them.
Yeah,
I didn't, it was never my intention to, like I started applying for funding, like a grant to make this album. And um I couldn't get past things like, how many followers do you have? How many, that I work in community and I live in community and I mobilize
yeah,
like we do in community. And there's something about it where I just trusted myself. Like, the Goodwill was packed. We
yeah.
packed the Goodwill. And I made them print physical tickets for me because I said, I'm going to go hustle. I'm going to go hustle this show and my community is going to come out. And I gave free tickets to people who I knew it was a barrier. It's just the kind of thing where like I'm just not interested in following industry standards. And if you want to listen to it, maybe you do a little bit more work and you got to find Bandcamp and you got to search me up. So I'm not sure at this point. I'm not quite sure if I'll go the Spotify route or anything like that. For now, it just feels like there's this beautiful buzz that
Yeah.
was created through this event that we put on, and having people come up to me and just say like, wow, that was like a love fest. There was just so much love in that room. And that will, we don't need to replicate that over and over and over again. That for me was very, very special, of very much a dream come true. So yeah, I'm not sure where it'll end up.
Okay. Well, no worries. That's cool.